Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Glenn Lawrence, and I'm back. And today, we got Matt Walsh. Sorry, Matt. You brought it upon yourself. Look, you made me do it. I was minding my business, and then you popped up on my YouTube screen, and I had to do it. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna let him go through this video, pause every once in a while, and yeah. Then I'm gonna unload on him. So let's go.
We opened the show yesterday with a discussion about the crisis of masculinity and the rise of Andrew Tate. And to very briefly summarize the key points made in that conversation, boys are growing up in a culture that is openly hostile to masculinity, and many are forced to navigate the minefield without the benefits of strong male role models to show them the path. And this crisis is self-perpetuating. It grows exponentially because the young men with absentee fathers eventually become absentee fathers themselves, repeating the cycle indefinitely unto infinity. And into this field of confusion and man-hatred steps guys like Andrew Tate and others, quickly earning an enormous following of young men who understandably flock to somebody who has a message that embraces masculinity rather than treating it like a disease. Andrew Tate, very often good at identifying the problems in our culture as they pertain to the situation that men face, and deserves credit for speaking up in defense of masculinity rather than denigrating it and calling for its eradication, essentially. But in my view, he misses the mark when it comes to the remedy. He seems to basically understand the disease, but he doesn't have the right prescription for it, or at least the full prescription. Yes, men should reject the programming that our culture wants to subject them to, programming which seeks to neuter and feminize them. Yes, they should work hard. They should take care of their minds and their bodies. Yes, they should strive for success, including financial success. But a life of hedonism and materialism and luxurious wealth, remaining unmarried while sleeping with dozens of different women and so on, is not the ideal to strive towards. Rather, what men are called to and created for, and the only sort of life that will be truly happy, that they'll find true happiness and joy in, is a life of service as protector and provider. Men, the vast majority of men anyway, are called to be husbands and fathers, to be leaders of their families. Now, they may be called to lead in other ways too, but first they must care for their families. If there's any saving our civilization at this point, which I think there is, but if there is, this is how it will be done. And this is who will do it. It's not going to be saved by influencers who are sitting in front of cameras, whether the guy in front of the camera is Andrew Tate or me or anyone else. It'll be saved through the formation and preservation of strong, intact, loving, and well-led families. That is the only way. It is the only way forward. If every man in the country starts going to the gym and starts making lots of money and starts having sex with lots of attractive women, and yet they don't get married and stay married and have children and raise and love those children, then we will still be headed to ruin. It'll be a slightly different kind of ruin, but ruin all the same. Those men themselves will ultimately find the happiness that they are able to derive in that lifestyle. They'll find that it's shallow and it's fleeting. And in the end, they'll die alone, loved by no one, loving no one, remembered by no one, leaving.
All right, so this is a good point to stop. Matt, there's been a lot of married men that got married. And they had that same dream and they desired to have that life that you're talking about. And a good majority of those men end up divorced, end up having their family taken away because the wife wanted to call it quits, had to lose years of being involved in their kids' lives, lost thousands of dollars due to financial obligations, i.e. child support and alimony, they end up dying alone. Nobody cared. They weren't remembered. If they were remembered by the fact that they were a paycheck. That's it. Your solution does not fix all the problems, bud. So your solution is contingent upon a perfect world where we don't do divorce and we don't do the negative things that we do today. Your contingent is your worldview is entirely based on the fact that we actually, as a culture and society, uphold marriage and commitment like we should. But see, the reality is our culture doesn't. So since there's no structure, no accountability factor where people cannot abuse divorce and marriage and capitalize on it like they are, since there's no way to stop that other than not getting married, you are not giving any solutions that are really valuable here, that are actually significant enough to make any type of change. You're just trying to shame people. You're really kind of come out of them like a feminine. Like you're really talking really feminine right now because you're trying to use emotional triggers to get a response. You know, are you a feminist, man? Like, is that your thing? Is that your goal? Because you sound really feminine right now. Anyways, the other thing is that what is like the feminist, plan? I mean, I have a quote, I could pull it up right now, where it says that, the feminist plan is to basically destroy the nuclear family. There's a lot of women that are feminists out there. And you want these guys to go out there and get married to them? These women, their goal is to destroy the very same thing that you were telling these guys up to try to preserve. So when your partner is now your enemy, how's that going to work? Dude, there's a deeper issue here. There's a deeper problem. And you're only worried about the guys that decide, you know what, maybe not getting in a relationship and getting married is a good thing because everybody seems to be taking an L in this area. And until these women get themselves together, until we're all on the same page and value the marriage and relationships like we ought to, I'm just going to drive my Ferrari and my Lambo and, travel the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because your solution is just throwing them right back in the slaughterhouse. No, guys, just pile on in one at a time, single file, go down the slaughterhouse. That's stupid. Like, why would you tell guys to do that? Like dude, like you're working for the other side way more than you think you're trying to help guys out. All right, let's let them continue.
No legacy behind. The feminized and neutered and effeminate man that our left-wing culture seeks to create, and then this other sort of man, both unmarried, both childless, will look very similar in the end, having taken two very different paths just to arrive together at essentially the same place. It's the family man, the devoted father and husband, whose different path actually leads to a different and much better conclusion. Now, I've, of course, been preaching this message for as long as I've had an audience to preach to, and I have found that there are like 2 or 3 basic responses or rebuttals, I guess, that I always hear from young men who may, for the most part, line up with me ideologically, but who doubt the wisdom of the get married and have kids prescription. And I was greeted with these same responses after the show yesterday and many messages and comments. What I'd like to do today is answer the objections, or at least what seems to be the one principal objection. The claim that I so often hear is that, well, marriage and family life is a trap. It's a scam, especially for men. The whole thing is rigged against us. There is nothing for a man to do but give up on the entire enterprise and go his own way. In fact, there's a whole movement online, men go their own way. And that's basically the idea. Just give up on this stuff and do something else. This argument was summarized in a comment from a listener named Joshua, which I'll read because I think it just is representative of this sort of mentality. He says, still sounds like Matt and most tradcons' definition of what masculinity means is exclusively through the lens of women and children's wants and needs. Unfortunately, that ideal will no longer work in the modern world with birth control, hookup culture, social media, and court systems that favor women and the denigration of traditional masculinity. I don't agree with all of Tate's views, but it sure beats Matt's prescriptions for young men. Again, I've read a great many comments making the same kind of point. A private message from another listener has a similar theme. It says, Matt, I agree with many of your opinions, but your message to men is off base. Young men follow Andrew Tate because his lifestyle is the ideal, whether you admit it or not. Wealth, fame, status, beautiful women were biologically programmed to want those things. Marriage is a losing game. The only solution in modern society is to reject the life of service, as you call it. So what is the problem with this view? Well, to begin with, it's nothing less than a full, unconditional surrender to the culture. It's true that the culture has increasingly made it difficult for both men and women to form and maintain strong, intact, lasting families. And that's because the elites who run our society don't want you to live that kind of life. They prefer that you focus on your individual wants, on fulfilling your own needs and satisfying your own desires. That's what they prefer for you. That's the life they want for you. A self-focused life is precisely the sort of life they wish for you. Makes you easier to manipulate, less of a threat to their agenda. Not really a threat at all. I mean, if you're just out there focused on yourself, being a consumer, buying lots of things for yourself, consuming things for yourself, and all the rest of it, you're not a threat to their agenda at all. I mean, you're going along with it. All of the things mentioned by Joshua in his comment, all of those things represent a conspiracy against the family. He's right about that. The way the family court systems are set up, birth control, all the rest of it. It's an attack on the family. So what is the answer? To give up? To give the conspirators exactly what they want? To reward them for their efforts by turning your back on the very thing they've been assaulting for decades? The family is the fortress that they have been attacking. And you can defend it with your life, or you can wave the white flag. But if you choose to surrender, then at least be honest about what you're doing. Be honest, this is not a rejection of the left's agenda, of the cultural elite's agenda. You are submitting to it. It is a submission.
It's not a submission, Matt. It's a calculated move. Okay, because think about it. What, you think all these guys are supposed to just continue to run through this shit? You don't even have a plan to change it. What is the plan to change it? How are you going to change it? You think guys are going to physically force their will upon women, and women are going to finally submit? You think that's going to be the outcome? Is that your plan? What is your solution? You want guys to run into this whole relationship, marriage thing blindly and saying, hey, yeah, you know what? Some of you guys are not going to make it. Some of you guys are, it's just not going to work out and you're going to get burned. And you know what? The odds of you end up committing suicide after the fact is about 3.5 to, 5 times higher than a woman would. But you know what? It's still worth it, buddy. Go out there, go risk everything. And you're not even giving them a solution. You're not giving a solution. You're giving a fucking execution. And you're trying to what kind of real man? You're just going to throw your shit away and all your legacy. You know what? Fuck you. Because you haven't had to go through it, dude. Luckily for you, you haven't had to go through it. But there's a lot of us that have. And a lot of us have barely made it through. And you know what? Even the guys that barely made it through, there's a lot of us that still love and value marriage. But we're going to do it a different way. We're going to come at it from a different approach. We're going to have proper safeguards in place before we even consider going down that path again. And we're also going to vet with these women better. We're going to have an expectation and a standard that needs to be met. But see, you're not talking about that. You're just talking about letting guys run aimlessly into situations and risk their lives. Yeah, you're a real fucking hero.
And it is certainly not the strong or masculine response to run away and abandon your post, to stop fighting because the fight is too difficult.
I didn't even get to switch the screens, and he already said some more dumb shit. Nobody's abandoning their post. Okay, what has happened is, if you really want to talk about it, men from previous generations has surrendered the post, surrendered their authority, surrendered their position, and gave it to them. Now that men are no longer in that position, or wanted in that position, or valued to be in that position, it's like, why become a cop if they don't give you a gun, they don't give you a badge, and give you no means to enforce the law, but they give you a uniform? How good of the job can you do? How good of a job? You wouldn't be able to do your job at all. Okay, you can't enforce and do your job correctly if you're not provided the tools that you need. But see what has happened? Society has stripped those tools away. Okay, society has thrown those tools away, and what their society has done is they have weaponized divorce and marriage against men, and you want men to be okay with that. Well, you know what, Matt? Things need to change first before guys will start wanting marriage. Things need to change on a structural, fundamental level before going anywhere. It's not us abandoning our post or not being masculine enough. No, we're masculine enough to realize, you know what? We're using our logical side of the brain. We're not basing things off of emotion. We're seeing logically, this is not a good bet right now. Logically, this is not going to be a good outcome. The odds are not worth the reward. Okay, like the risk is too great here. It's like a bad investment. All right, would you bet all your money on something that has a 50% rate of failure? Would you? I highly doubt you would. You wouldn't bet your livelihood. You wouldn't bet your future's family's livelihood. Would you? Would you bet your kid's livelihood on it? No, you wouldn't. Not at 50%. And not with the way that no-fault divorce is everywhere. And not the way that the legal system is not even. It's unbalanced and favors one side. No. When you add all these factors up, it's like, you know what? It's not a good bet. Even though I may want to and desire to be married, the way that we do marriage today is not enough. There's not enough there to provide even the smallest amount of security for a guy going into it. But it gives all the security to the woman. You know, these feminists say they want equality, right? They want equal. They want to be equal in everything. Well, how about these women become equal, and when they get divorced, they equally get to lose half of everything. They equally get to lose half of the visitation with their kids. They equally get to deal with being parentally alienated from their children. And it be considered okay, just like how it is now when that happens to guys. Let's give them that equality too. Or let's give them the equality that when there's a domestic violence issue, statistically speaking, women are the ones that are committing the most of the domestic violence. Men just commit domestic violence and they do the most damage. But nobody wants to talk about who's actually committing more domestic violence. So then when the cops come over because they have a domestic violence scenario, they're going to ask her what happened. You didn't do anything, but she attacks you. Guess what? You're gone. Why should guys get involved in these situations? Why should guys put themselves in a position where they could be put in these situations and risk losing everything? You're not offering any solution or any security. Saying, hey guys, if we do it and we do it this way, we can mitigate the risks. No, you just want to try to attack their, masculinity and trying to shame them, trying to make it seem like they're not really a man. Well, you know what, dude? You're a bearded woman, Seriously, like, you were like that one bearded lady that was on Dr. Phil, but really it was a man. Like, because you're only talking from a real feminine, emotional place. And I thought you were logical. I thought you were smart. I thought you were like a smart guy. I really did. You fooled me. Because I really thought you were. I thought Matt Walsh was someone smart. But shit. All you showing me is that you just as dumb as everyone else. You just had your moments. You had some smart moments, but now you just showing me how stupid you really are.
I mean, that approach is many things, but it certainly isn't manly. And where do you go instead? I mean, what is the next move? To give up on the family is to give up on human civilization, seeing as how there cannot be a human civilization without the family. So what's plan B after you've given up on civilization? What's next? You're also giving up on yourself, on your own legacy, your own bloodline. You are descended from a long line of men stretching back thousands of years who formed families and raised children, often under circumstances far more dire than what we face. And you're giving up on them too. You are surrendering your future and your past. You're giving up on everything. And what is your consolation prize? Finding financial success? I mean, the unfortunate irony is that many of the men who give up on these things in favor of, well, I'll just focus on myself and try to be financially successful, many of them are never even going to be financially successful. So they end up with just nothing. They end up broke and alone with nothing.
Yeah, some of them do. But a lot of men that get married end up broke and alone with nothing. And actually, some of them don't even get to live out their full lives. Because the pressure and the struggle and the loss of everything hits them so hard that they can't get past it. And they just think that they're better off and their family's better off and their loved ones that they don't even have anymore because they live somewhere else are better off without them. So they do something. They take a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And they're gone forever. You know what the end of their story is? Their story is told that they had some mental health disorder. And they just snapped and just ended everything. No, that's not the truth, but that's what they're going to be told. That's how their story ends, Matt. Those guys that really wanted the relationships to work out. That's how some of those guys' stories end. So, you could end up alone. But if you're alone and you're not dead, and you lived a full, fulfilled life, you got to experience all the great things this world has provided other than marriage, hey, still made it out pretty good. And if you really feel alone, you just get a fucking dog. Get a bulldog. Those dogs are awesome. I had one. He died. That was bad. But get a bulldog. They chill. Sit with you, do everything with you. You never feel alone. And a dog will love the fuck out of you too. Dogs love their owners. They are more loyal and loving than a woman will ever be. Remember that.
But even if you find it, the financial success, so what? I mean, who cares about money if you have nothing meaningful to spend it on? I have money. I don't have Andrew Tate's money, but I have money. And nearly all the joy and happiness I derive from having money is that it allows me to provide for my family. That's pretty much it. That's the entire thing. That's why I like having the money, is that I find great pleasure in being able to care for a wife and 6 kids. Proud of that fact. If I didn't have them, the money would mean very little to me. I mean, I could buy nice things and drive a fancy car and live in my nice house alone. But for what? Now, does that mean that if you start a family that you're guaranteed to live a joyful and fulfilled life? Well, of course not. It's a risk. And yes, the risks are in some ways much greater in modern times. We have all been poisoned by this demonic culture to one extent or another. We are all poisoned. If you marry someone, you are marrying someone who has been poisoned, who has ingested the poison, who has, had taken a drink from the well of modern culture. Everybody has, as have you. And yes, if things go sideways, if you're a man, you marry a woman and your wife turns out to be a disloyal vulture, or if you turn out to be a disloyal vulture, or you both do, the deck will be stacked against you in court. No, there's no question about that. Divorce may ruin your life. And, if you give your heart to someone, if you bind yourself to them, not only through the marriage vow, but then also through children you conceive together, then they will have all they need to rip your guts out and burn your life to the ground. That is absolutely true. That's the risk, okay? But it's a risk worth taking. Every great joy can become a great tragedy if you aren't careful, or if you have very bad luck. That's true. So is the answer then to forego all joy? To say forget about joy because it might not work out? To embrace a life of loneliness and misery because
Why you again, you using so many of female talking points. Man, like, emotions change. Emotions are not consistent. Emotions cannot stay consistent. Joy is not something that you feel every single day. I guarantee you haven't felt joyful the entire time you've been married. And if you say you did, I know goddamn well you're a liar. All right. Nobody feels joyful all the time. It's not realistic. All right. But why do you think being alone is miserable or misery? You're assuming that. You're like trying to paint this picture like this is what joy is and this is what misery is. And those guys are going down this road, you're just going to be miserable. But the guys that are over here, they're going to be joyful. Dude, do you know how manipulative you are? Do you? Like, I will say it again. Manipulation is a female trait. And Matt Walsh right now is acting like the biggest female I've ever met. He's trying to be manipulative. He's using shaming words. He's trying to use trigger tactics. These are all things. These are all ways women try to get guys to bend the knee. They try to get guys to fall in line. Because, the reason why they do that is because they can't physically enforce their will on them. Right? And look at Matt. He's obviously not really big or built for durability. Okay, like he looks a little soft, right? So what is he going to use? He's going to use the tactics that he knows that have worked against him or probably other guys he knows. Since he can't force me physically to accept his way, he's going to try to manipulate me. or in you and everybody listening. Well, listen, Matt, it's not working. We don't give a fuck what you say anymore. You know, you're irritating us right now. You really are. And the thing is, like, there's this rule I like to do. And it goes like this when you're hearing information, you guys. And you know who taught me this? Rollo Tomasi taught me this. You know, when you're intaking information and you get mad about it, you feel angry about it, before you react, ask yourself this question. Why are you getting angry? Are you getting angry because what they're saying is true? Well, then you probably just, if they're true and they're talking about something that you're doing, then that's okay. You know why? Because that means you could fix that. You could fix if you're falling short. You could fix if there's something that you're doing wrong. Okay? And you don't got to project that anger on them. You could just be, yeah, drop the ball. Get it. Cool. Now, and that's okay. Just don't react on them. But then if you're getting angry when you're hearing information because it's wrong, the information that's being told is false, and they're trying to convince you that it's right, well, then your anger is justified. The anger is justified, but it doesn't mean you have to react on it or do anything to them. All you have to do is realize that, okay, this individual is either intentionally lying to me and trying to give me false information and trying to manipulate me. I'm not dealing with this motherfucker no more. This person is no longer a person of value, and I'm out. They don't want them, need them in my life at all. No, good, gone. Get them out. Because as easy as it would be for me to like snap Matt in half, I don't see any point in doing so. What really is sad, though, what probably is really upsetting me right now is that there's probably guys that are getting convinced by this bullshit. That are going to end up falling for the guilt trips and the shame and the manipulation. And they're going to end up putting themselves in a situation because they think Matt Walsh is right. And then they find out years down the road that they're in the situation they were trying to avoid the entire time. So, Matt, like, you are like, what you're doing is so disrespectful to just humanity. It's sad. Because at least I'm not at least I'm not telling guys like you have to do this to have a fulfilled life. Look, I'm telling guys like, look, until we as a culture and a society learn to value marriage and relationships like we should, like the Bible says we should, okay, like our grandparents and our great-grandparents did, until we get back to a place that we as a society and a culture are there, not just one party, not just one group of society, but the entire society holds that value. Until we get there, we can't fix anything. All right. And to think that men should just take it on the chin and just give it a good attaboy and run in there blind. No. You're a fool. You're a fucking fool.
Because you're worried that if you aim higher, you'll end up lonely and miserable? You're worried that in the end, you'll end up in this state. So instead you say, well, I might as well just live in this state to begin with. Doesn't make any sense. So you take the risk. And you mitigate the risk at the same time by being smart about who you marry and by grounding your marriage and your family in faith and mutual devotion, and by working hard every day to hold up your own end of the bargain, Because there are some men out there who do everything right, and they're great men, and they're devoted to their families, and they're intensely loyal, and all of that, and their families fall apart anyway because they accidentally married a soulless, disloyal scumbag. I mean, that does happen, and sometimes it happens in the reverse. But that's not the majority of cases. Most of the time, it takes two to tango.
Matt, it happens 50% of the time. Okay, when something happens 50% of the time. No, it's not the majority. Actually, I think it might be. I think I saw something that said it was like 54% divorce rate. And if that's the case, then that means it is the majority. By a slim margin, but it is. But when you have odds of 50%, are you going to go into that? No, it's not even worth it. It's not worth gambling and losing everything for. That's not the type of risk anybody should take. All right, we're going to finish it off like this.
2 to get married, 2 to ruin the marriage. Which means that marriage is not a mere roll of the dice. There's quite a lot you can do to secure your good fortune. That's why I never cared about the statistics. When I was getting married and I heard about this, statistically, I'm not a statistic. I'm not just some number on a spreadsheet. And neither is my wife. We're human beings. I'm not subject to statistics. Not merely subject to them. Because the one thing statistics don't take into account are choices. It's about the choices you make. Whether you're married.
Yeah, it's about the choices we make as people. And when somebody makes a choice that ends up putting you at risk because they were selfish, that's out of your control. But you can mitigate that choice. All right? You could do things to help alleviate the damages from their choices. And sometimes some of those choices is just, for some guys, it's just not getting involved in marriage, not taking the risk. And that's okay. And you shouldn't shame guys because they don't do what you do. So, like, what? We're not real men unless we're doing exactly what Matt Walsh does? Get the fuck out of here, dude.
Marriage works or not, it's about choices that are made in the marriage. If one or both of you make bad choices, your chances are going to be very poor. If you make good choices, they won't be. That's what it is.
No,
and yet the risk is always there.
Both parties have to make the right choices. Both parties do. Because one person can be making all the right choices, but still lose. The marriage could still end. Okay? Both parties have to have integrity. Both parties have to know this is what they want and that they are going to be in it and play their roles. Both parties have to play their positions. Men need to be husbands and have the authority that husbands have. Wives need to be wives and play the role and be that helpmate and that person that respects him and honors him, okay? Because of his position. That needs to happen. And husbands need to love their wives. Okay, like that's what has to happen. But we don't see that. We see men not loving their wives, and we see wives not respecting and loving their husbands and not being submissive to their husbands and, doing things behind their husband's back, like petty things. Okay. And we see guys not loving their wives and looking at other women or pursuing other women or checking out other women or whatever the case is. We see it on both sides, but until we address Both fucking sides. You're not going to have a fucking solution. You're just going to have more victims of broken homes.
So will you live in fear of it, or will you have the courage and go forward anyway? One other thing I want to say, and this is important to say, that it's just not true. Okay, it's just not true that a life of obscene luxury and materialism and selfishness and self-service and of sleeping with many different women and all of that, it's not true that that is the ideal, which we so often hear these days. That's the ideal.
It's not true for you. It's not true for those that hold your values and your desires. But it could be true for somebody else. Don't assume that you know what's, true for everybody. Because you don't.
Non-monogamy, having many sexual partners. That's the ideal, they say. That's not true. Much less is it what we are biologically.
That's definitely not true. Okay, that non-monogamy is just going to continue the cycle that we have, which is a bunch of broken homes and men not knowing who the father is. We already have enough of that. 10 to 30% of men that, were wondering whether or not they were the father or not, found out that they weren't the father. That's a pretty high number.
Programmed to desire. No, it's what we're culturally programmed to desire. That is the cultural programming. But I know that it's not biological because I'm a biological organism and I don't desire that. I don't want any life but the one I have. I don't want any woman but the one I married. I mean, you could listen to that and say, oh, that's not true. He's just saying it. That's a cope on your part. That's resentment, envy talking. If I could do my life over from the start, I would find my wife again and marry her again. If I lived 100 lives, I'd marry her in all of them. That's what it means to love somebody. And love is the ideal because it's not mere biological programming. It is transcendent. And trust me, it's well worth the risk. And that'll do it for this portion of the show as we move over to the members block. Hope to see you there. If not, talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.
Yeah. I'm just going to I said enough, but I'll just kind of recap it all here. The problem with these solutions that people give out, especially from someone coming from his worldview, is that it puts the entirety of the fixing, assuming that the problem is men and that men have to fix themselves. And if men would just fix themselves, then everything will be fine. That's a lie. Because we both know men and women are flawed. Men and women both make mistakes. Men and women both complicate their lives. But if you're just focused on one party, one group of people, and telling them that they have to do things and fix themselves, and just be a certain way and everything will work out, while not addressing the other party and be like, look, you also need to pull your weight. There's things that you are falling short on, and you need to fix yourself. Unless you're addressing both parties, both sides of the coin, you're not getting anything done. You're not fixing anything. And what, Matt, please do yourself a fucking video and give yourself some room for redemption and make a video telling women how fucking unmarriageable they are these days. If you did that, you might be able to redeem yourself a little bit. But like as it is right now, dude, no guy should listen to the shit that you're saying. In my opinion. I'm not telling it's a fact. I'm just saying in my opinion. Nobody should be listening to the bullshit that's coming out of your mouth. And that's all I got to say. Matt Walsh, you done yourself in, buddy.